Welcome to Rock Your Reinvention, where I help high-achieving career women like you get unstuck, make your corporate exit strategy, and successfully transition to your next chapter. Hi, I'm your host, Karen Freeland, a certified life coach and corporate exit strategist. Whether you want to start a business, become a speaker, or something else, I'm here to give you the tools and strategies to shift your mindset, build your confidence, and take bold actions so you can rock your reinvention. Ready? Let's go. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Rock Your Reinvention. I love talking about money on this show because I think one of the hardest mindset shifts for high-achieving women making six figures and more is to stop defining your worth by those numbers on your paycheck. And I know it's not easy. It's not an overnight fix. And that's what makes me so excited to have Liesa Peterson on today. She is a wealth coach, a keynote speaker, and the author of The Mindful Millionaire, which I have been reading and I'm in love with. She helps people discover genuine prosperity so they can live abundantly. And we're going to talk all about what that means today. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Liesa.
Thank you, Karen. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad you agreed to coming on the show. We just met a few weeks ago. We're in an authoress group for other female authors. And I knew as soon as you introduced yourself and said what the title of your book was, I was like, I have to talk to you. And I also need to read this amazing book because I have personally had to do so much work on my money mindset. And I feel like it really is kind of a journey and an evolution. It's something that we're always sort of conscious of. And so we can talk about that a little bit today, but I would just love for people to get to know you a little bit better. What was the defining moment in your life that got you to where you are now?
Two things come to mind, two defining moments. One is growing up in a home where scarcity kind of ruled the day. So we can talk more about what that means, but that was a defining aspect of my life. And I continue to live, I guess we could say, a bit in the shadow still to this day of what that impact had on my life. The other defining moment would be realizing that money had way too much power over the Western consumer-oriented society that I was a part of. So wait a minute, what if our whole entire life is being looked at through this lens of money, and yet that is the most destructive way that we could possibly be looking at our lives? And I think that changed my whole perspective. All of a sudden, I went from being a victim to money to what am I going to do about this? How can I not only help myself, but how can I help my children? How can I help my community? How can I help other people who had struggled with scarcity also turn things in a direction where we're living, lives of greater fulfillment and enjoyment?
Yeah. I mean, the F word, fulfillment, is the key, right? That should be the thing that we're all sort of aiming for and striving for. And yet for most people in today's society, that's way low on the bucket list, right? I'll get to a life of fulfillment someday. Right now, I'm just adulting, earning money, climbing the corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you said too about the way we grow up and having that scarcity mentality. And it's amazing because it really does stay with you. And I see so many of my clients who are making $500,000, $600,000 a year. And I mean, even in some of the lower tiers, and they're walking around like they're dirt poor. They're so afraid that tomorrow the shoe's going to drop and it's all going to be gone and they're going to have to go back to this old way of life. And it rules their thinking day in and day out.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, depending on how deep it goes, it may never completely go away. And I didn't really believe that. Maybe even when I was writing The Mindful Millionaire, I was like, we can beat it. We can overcome it. And now, 5 years later, what I've noticed is it isn't this utopian idea of abundance and getting rid of all thoughts of scarcity. It's like, how do you help yourself? How do you become so self-aware of your patterns of thought and your patterns of behavior that you can become your own best friend rather than like your own living nightmare?
Yeah, I just had like a somatic reaction to that. And I think what my body is telling me is just like relief in hearing you say that, because for so long, money for me has always been a dialogue, an intense dialogue. Every purchase, every decision, everything I do is like, do I deserve it? Do I have enough money? Can I really afford this? Am I trying to prove myself? But like, okay, but who cares, Karen? You're a boss girl. Do it. Like, right. And there's this whole, like, it's exhausting. And so it's gotten so much better. And I want to share a couple of like two really big epiphanies I had while reading your book, but it's not gone. And so the fact that you're kind of saying like, look, it may never be gone, and maybe having it gone isn't the goal, but it's really just that you have that higher level of consciousness and it doesn't have to be so much of a struggle.
Yeah.
That gives me hope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love hearing like what I want to hear about your realization.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I am on page 219. So I wanted to do the whole thing before we had the podcast. And then I honestly was just like, I want to slow down and honor all the exercises in the work. And I don't want to rush through it because I had more than plenty of questions to make this a really fruitful discussion. But two big epiphanies. The first one, and I texted you or messaged you before I was even done with chapter 1. I'm like, this book is changing my life. And you were just like, what? Like, how is this possible? But I honestly was on like page 4 or 5 probably. And I just stood up and I walked over to the kitchen cabinet and I took these, I'm not kidding you, expired salmon oils, this fish oil that I had been taking every day because I had this idea that we spent good money on these vitamins. And it was during COVID. So everyone is afraid like we're not going to get food or anything, you know? So we're like, we got to have vitamins. And my husband bought like all these vitamins. And he's like, throw them out, Karen. They're rancid. They're old. Don't put that in your body. And I just kept feeling like, no, I gotta get my money's worth. I gotta finish these. And I was like, you know what? Today's the day. Goodbye. We're done. I went upstairs and I threw out a bunch of maternity underwear, thongs. They were thongs, so they still were like, you know, fashionable or whatever, but they were maternity underwear. And I should have gotten rid of them years ago. My son's freaking 15. Like, what am I doing? And then I walked over to my bathroom and I took this makeup brush that was like disintegrating. Every time I would put my foundation on, like the bristles were going everywhere. But I was like, but it still works. And I was like, goodbye. Have a nice life. Like, it's okay. Let's replace these things, right? And it just was this freeing lightness that like, it's okay, Karen, you don't have to hold on to this stuff. This is just your scarcity mentality.
Wow.
So that was huge. And I've seen it now in other things. Like we finished the broccoli the other day and there was like a couple pieces left and nobody wanted it. And I'm not heating up the old leftover broccoli. I hate throwing out food. I have a thing about it, but that again is also like a scarcity thing. And I was like, it's okay, Karen. Like it's just some crumbs of broccoli. Like let it go. It's fine. So it's been very freeing. And then the second one was I was sitting there kind of just looking at the title going, The Mindful Millionaire. Am I a millionaire? Do I want to be a millionaire? What, like, I don't know. I just started having these thoughts about it. I thought, well, I know that my husband and I together have reached over $1 million in net worth, but what about me as an individual? I was just curious. And I did the math and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about 41,000 away from really being millionaire status. But get this. So I'm like, all right, by 45, that's a year from now almost. Like I got this. I'll be a millionaire. Then a couple days later, I'm like, wait a second, you didn't factor in your car. You didn't factor in your home. I'm like, I'm already a millionaire. And it was just this like, I know. And I was like, this is so exciting. Here I am thinking like I'm striving for something that I've already achieved. And now there's this new freedom in a way that I can approach this work in your book, knowing like you're already doing all the right things, Karen. Now it's like the fine tuning. Now it's just like taking it to the next level. And I don't know. So those were like two big epiphanies and I track my money. Like I budget, I do all the things. Right. And so but the fact that I didn't actually know that was like, wow, that was like the missing piece of the puzzle.
You are not alone. You are not
Mm,
alone with either of what you're talking about. And it is in the realization, it is in the understanding of like, I've worked really hard. I've created something. I really have all this opportunity to be celebrating the life that I've created. And yet, back to the culture that we live in, nobody's out there, outside of obviously self-help books. And, there are pockets of this information, but you got to go looking for it. And some of it can
yes.
be like so disconnected from reality. Like, I did not want to write that book. I wanted to have a book that was inspiring, but also grounded in like real life struggles and real life
Yeah.
challenges with money, because that's what I had gone through. And my husband and I, because I didn't have very much money growing up, I made money kind of like a god. And then I started facing these tragedies, right, in my early 30s. And then before I started my company 11 years ago. And every time these tragedies would happen, I would wake up to the fact that I really wasn't living on purpose. And a lot of the reason behind why I wasn't living the life I think I could be living was all wrapped up in these stories about money. And so
Yeah.
I love that you're having those realizations. And I feel like they are not just liberating, like that aha moment, but I feel like they work inside the cells of our body. Like they
Hmm.
literally make us healthier when we aren't doing this behavior that keeps us small, keeps us, kind of like tight and
Yeah.
stressed and anxious. Those things are not good for our bodies. I feel like I look at pictures. I kid you not, Karen. Like, I look at pictures of myself before I started all of this 11 years ago, where I left my financial advising job and I started coaching and teaching and all of that. I look 10 years older in my 40s. I look older than I do today. Like, I'm like, how is that even possible? Because I'm
Yeah.
58, but I look older because that stress takes its toll on us in all these
Yes.
ways.
Yeah, and that's such a great point, right? That it really does impact more than your bank account, right? It impacts your relationships, your health, everything around you. So, is there like one transformation that you've witnessed as a result of your work that just really stands out for you? And it may even be your own personal transformation.
One person in particular that stands out was actually the woman who inspired the Mindful Millionaire, interesting enough. And I continue to be in regular contact with her. She was a coaching client of mine, and I kept trying to write a book, and she was coaching with me. And at some point along the way, I kind of did this like pause. I'm trying to write this book. I have this amazing agent who wanted me to write this book. This is way before the Mindful Millionaire came to be. And I went back to this client who I've been working with for a couple years, and she owns a house cleaning company in Florida. She had come from a lot of scarcity, and she was making big strides in like changing the way that she was with money. But I was like, I don't think we're going deep enough. I'm like, could we
Mm.
start all over again? Could you tell me the darkest, deepest, like, I want to go back to like when you were born, and I want to go through your life, because there's things that I'm learning about people and their relationship with money, but I need to go deeper. And she opened her whole entire life to me and let me come in. And she ended up becoming the heart chakra story, which I'm not sure if you're there yet, but like,
Mhm.
she was the center, like the cornerstone of all the other stories. Because then when I went back and I found 7 different people, she being one of 7, who would tell me their life stories. But the reason, back to your question, is what happened for her is she was caught in this web that you're talking about. And when we started doing the work and we started applying these principles that I teach in the book to her life, she began to question every single area of her life. her relationship with her sons, her relationship with her ex-husband, her relationship with her business, her relationship with money, like every single aspect got picked up, looked at, and decisions were made. Is this the kind of life I want to be living or not?
Right.
And she was ruthlessly honest with herself. And I helped her do that. But the work also was like supporting her in that. And so fast forward all these years later, like 8 years later, her business is thriving. But that's even like what she came into it was about the money. But that's actually not what's going on. Like her relationships are thriving. She is in massive love with herself before she didn't even know that there was a self. Like her
Right.
whole entire life comes from this grounded, powerful, confident place where she knows who she is. She doesn't rely on other people to tell her who she is. She has a standard for living her best life, and she does it every single day.
And I love that you brought up the 7 chakras because you talk about this in your book and how they are related to scarcity patterns. And this was a new one for me. I never thought about how the chakras played into my money mindset. And I really, really resonated with the heart chakra as the one that for me is probably the most out of balance. And I'm not sure, to be honest, that I've ever truly experienced unconditional love. And it's hard to say that out loud. And I'm sure if someone in my family heard that, they would say, "What do you mean? I love you." And I'm sure my husband would say, "I love you." And yeah, but like giving unconditional love and then accepting and receiving unconditional love are actually two totally different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I've ever been in a place where I could believe everything that's being told to me, like, oh, that compliment. I'm like, no, you don't really love my nose. You don't really love my hair, my whatever, my ears, this, that, the other way. Like, I don't even love it. Like, how could you love it? And so one of the things that I've been trying to now do is shift this idea of unconditional love to my creator, right? And the love that he has for me and that he built me in that perfect image of himself and like every little wrinkle, nook and cranny, like it's all just right where it's supposed to be, right? And so that's kind of helping me start that process of like, okay, I do see a world where someone could actually love the whole package. But I'm just curious for people like me, and I think a lot of women, this will resonate for them. What tips do you have to someone who needs to bring that heart chakra back into balance?
Yeah. So just for people who might be new to this, the heart chakra, well, little side note. So people might have heard of the chakras. I talk about it in the book because to me, it's an ancient form of psychology. It goes back over 4,000 years. It's been used in the Eastern tradition, in India particularly. But I found it very helpful because it explains the maturation process that we start when we're in the womb, and it goes to about age 27 when we're growing and maturing. And there can be things that happen as we're growing up that cause us to not live into our fullest potential. And so money is kind of mimicking that process. And so when the heart chakra is out of balance, we can have difficulty trusting others. We can feel unworthy of love, particularly receiving love, like you mentioned. We can have a hard time letting go of past hurts. We can feel disconnected from others, or like you mentioned, from our spiritual source. And so it's really good what you're talking about doing for yourself. But the tips for balancing the heart chakra would be practicing self-compassion. The idea that I am always doing the best that I can, and I know that because that's what happened. Thinking of ourselves, like holding ourselves in high regard, like our own best friend. Gratitude practice is the reason that comes up over and over again, is it's very powerful to like remember what you're grateful for. Daily acknowledging of the blessings can open the heart. Forgiveness work is another big one. And that had a lot to do with like the work that I was talking about that Jenny and many of my clients end up needing to do, is forgiving ourselves for things that have happened in the past, but also forgiving others who feel like, or really did hurt us. And we have a hard time letting go of that pain and that anguish. And there are more, but maybe I'll just pause and see like what's coming up for you.
No, for sure. That resonates so much. And I think, one of the memories that as I was trying to do my money story and go back to just some of those like pivotal points, like I remember dating a guy in high school and he drew this picture of the Energizer bunny, but with my head on it. Cause I had a lot of energy, like I'm a pretty dynamic person, but it was really clear to me in that moment that it was too much. It was too much energy. And then there were some situations in high school where teachers were like, oh, you talk too much, you do this too much. And so it was like constantly putting myself back in this little box and making sure that I don't have too much energy. And then now I get so many compliments from people like, I love your energy. I love being around, like, oh yeah, you're so inspirational. You bring so much energy. But to me, I hear you have so much energy or that you have great energy. And I'm like, no, you're lying. I don't. I know it's too much. I'm too much. Okay. And it's immediately like I want to shrink. So people think they're giving me a compliment and it's like inflicting that old wound again, but it shouldn't be. And so that's one of the things that I realized through this. I'm like, oh, if I want my heart chakra really in balance, this is something I need to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you shared that because it's going to help lots of people because what we're exploring is like these shadows where what I always say is that wherever there's a shadow, there's an opportunity for like a superhuman quality. But there's something inside of that experience that we really do need to get to the root of. We can't just sugarcoat it. We can't just act like it doesn't matter. Like we've got to come to terms with the truth of like, why is that thing so concerning to us? And as you probably will notice, the questions inside of the book, especially that part 2, are trying to bring the money story in particular, which is all heart chakra oriented, is allowing you to look at the story that you may have written about yourself in the past. So in this case, the story that you wrote in your past is the energy is too much for other people to handle, let's just say. Mm-hmm. And I need to accommodate for that. So when we're inside of writing that, we look at that in and of itself, which is a whole other process. We look at like, okay, where did that come from? Where were those pivotal moments? Like you said, the Energizer bunny, that picture, like we need to go into those to not only forgive ourselves for whatever experience we had, but also forgive like the people involved.
Right.
Not that it's like, it was stupid, that they did that or whatever their intentions were, but we have to like literally create free, clear, open space in that memory. Mm-hmm. In that memory, we can only feel love and appreciation for the experience. And if we feel anything other than that, we're going to still have this show up as a shadow. Because ultimately, jumping ahead, when we go back to the story, when you write your money story, let's say in this particular situation, that new belief system could be something like, my energy is what's created my wealth.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
But for those big pivotal moments, a lot of us just want to avoid it and just be like, well, if I just tell myself it's going to be fine, everything's fine, it'll go away. And that may work for some people. It's just never worked for me. Like I've got to go there.
Right. Right. Yeah, same. Me too. And clear it, like really clear it out. That was super helpful. Thanks for just kind of digging a little bit deeper. And in your book, you do a great job of going through each one of the chakras and giving scenarios of like what this might look like, what might have happened in your childhood, what we might have experienced or done as a result in your adulthood. So there's a lot of things that are going to be very eye-opening, and all of you need to go get the Mindful Millionaire. I want to talk about also this whole idea of prosperity. You say that it is custom fitting your life so it's made just for you. And I think a lot of times when we hear prosperity, we think wealth. We automatically think money, more money. And I think this is part of why we need to stop comparing ourselves to others, because we can't custom fit prosperity to ourselves when we're looking at what everyone else has and being envious of it. So can you just talk more about this idea of money, actually the prosperity ladders, I think is what it was, and how that helps you do just that?
Yeah, what's coming to mind is that prosperity is going to only come from you. You have to be the person who decides what prosperity is. And I'll give you an example. And I've never seen it before, but something in this conversation is coming to me. So this isn't in the book, but let's look at the different phases of our lives. So I'm in my late 50s. What prosperity means to me at 58 is freedom, travel, saying whatever I want to say, regardless of like the impact it might have on people who don't want to hear it. Like really speaking, like
Yeah.
after menopause, the freedom that comes, like prosperity looks very different for me. I'm not wanting to make a lot more money. I'm about how do I preserve what I've built and make sure that it lasts me for the rest of my life. That is a very different phase than if I go back to like my 40s. My 40s, because I'm a parent and my children are 8 years apart, my 40s were all about, am I being a good parent? Am I making good choices? Am I there when they need me? Am I helping them and being of service of them? In my 40s, my husband and I both were coaches for this thing called Odyssey of the Mind, a worldwide competition. We devoted 5 years of our lives to like showing up and hosting these gatherings of up to 7 kids in our house for 2 different teams, right? We were just totally inside of the child, parent, coach experience. Go back to my 30s, like prosperity was that. So in my 30s, it was all about career. It was all about money. It was all about getting ahead. I had a child, but I wasn't as focused on her as I was on my career, if I'm honest. So we
Yeah.
need to be really cognizant of like, at this point in my life, is what I'm prioritizing in alignment with the values that are most important to me, and why? And is that going to be something that I'm going to be like happy with later in life? Or am I going to look back and think I really messed it up because I didn't have my
Mhm.
priorities right?
Oh, yeah. And that resonates. I mean, I've definitely had those moments where I've looked back and been like, oh, I didn't do that right. I wish I could go back and do it different. And I have to remind myself, you can't go back and do it different. You did what you did. So you can only make it right going here on out, right? It's
Yes.
like try to bring myself back to that present moment. But I think, yeah, when we are so married to what everyone else thinks is prosperity, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. I notice, and it's not about living in regret. I love that you say that, but it's like, I think we do need to look back because it fuels the decisions that we make in the moment. Like, I am
Hmm.
not going to make that mistake again. The other day, we got the opportunity, or a couple months ago, to like get last minute tickets to go to New Zealand. And we had just gotten back from 3 weeks in New Zealand. So it felt ridiculous to like go spend another 3 weeks, but it was a really good deal. We could use miles, it took less miles. It just all came together and we could carve out the time. And it was like, maybe because of some of the times when I've said no in the past, when I really wish I had said yes, I was like, honey, we can do this. We need to do this. Like, seize the moment. And that energy
Right.
made it happen.
That's so cool. I love it. But we can't get there, right, if we don't work through some of the other prosperity steps. And so the ladder number one is this whole idea of like, I am safe and supported by life, right? So we've got enough money, we're paying our bills, like we're taking care of ourselves. And then we can kind of work up to the idea of being powerful with our money or being appreciated for our contributions. And so, and then we get to this like final ladder where you're like, yeah, I am prosperous. I'm doing all the right things. And this is all custom fit for me in the way that I want to live.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's so cool. I just love, I mean, you have so many things in the book that just make it so tangible and there's great visuals and stuff, right? So, anyway, I love your book, clearly.
It's
All right.
funny. I just want to say something about the book
Yeah,
because it's not for the faint of heart. I think it's really got to hit
right.
people at the right time. However, the cool thing about the book is there's 3 phases or 3 parts. The first part is like a really fast read. I think you don't have to be like pulling out your journal. You don't have to do all these steps. You can just like read it. And I think no matter where people are at, that part of the book is like really helpful to get you to question some assumptions. If you want to go deeper and not everybody's ready, you can go on to part 2, which is when you start diving into your own experiences and like your practice and like, how do you want to, if you know that you want to make changes, now you can make them. But I like to say that because sometimes people think, oh, I'm just going to get this book, I'm going to read it from start to finish, and then it's done. It's really not that book.
I agree. You want to do the work. And there definitely were. Like I said, over chapter 1, I already had 2 huge epiphanies, So it will still impact your life. But if you really want to clear it out and you really want to make the strides, it's like any self-help book. You have to, well, not that your book is like other self-help books, but that, they don't work unless you do the work. You have to put some effort in. You can't just read them and expect your whole life to change. You have to do things differently and apply the principles and the things that are discussed. So this is a concept I love, and I've never heard anyone say this, and maybe this is you're just like, I don't care, I'm going to say it, and I thought this was so good. But this whole concept of how terrible money can be when it's your why versus how awesome it can be when it's one of your many hows. And I was like, thank you for calling out that money can be terrible and that's not really a good why. That's not what we want to be like the driving force for the things that we're doing. So can you just talk more about this idea of money being a tool and why it's important to see it that way?
Yeah. One of the other things I mentioned is too often people use money as a measuring stick of like, how well am I doing at life? And I talk that's not probably so helpful. And keep in mind, everything that I'm writing about are things that I have personally done the opposite of and like had to learn. So just want to say that out loud. Like there's no judgment in this book. That's really, really important to me because the idea that money is a tool to fuel your life, to fuel the things that are important to you, changes the whole configuration of how you go about creating more of it. Because it changes the way that you earn it, it changes the way you save it, and it changes the way you invest it. When it's just a tool, you're thinking about it as, okay, this is my goal. This is the thing that I want. How am I going to get there? Not all of this gobbledygook of, am I worthy of it? Do I deserve it? Like I never, ever, ever say, when you talk about, let's say what you charge your clients or what you get paid at work, like you're worth it. That is not language I use because what you're worth is priceless. It's not supposed to have a price associated with it. Again, back to these are just ways of how money, we've been given these mixed messages or not helpful messages about money. And we need to deprogram money from being associated with the measuring stick or the worth or any of that stuff. Like all I want you to do is decide how much money do you want? And what are you going to do with it? Like, why does that have value to you? That's all that matters. And there is a point in our society where you will say, if you do this well, you're going to say, I have enough. Because you were so clear at what the goals were that you achieve those goals. And you're like, I have enough. And I'll tell you, that scares the crap out of a lot of people. It scared me because you're like, well, who am I going to be if I have enough? Does that mean I'm just going to give up on life? Absolutely not. That's when life gets really juicy because now you're like, oh my goodness, I freed up all this energy that was oriented to like proving and validating and showing. Now you're like, oh, all that energy can be like use to come up with like creative ideas and how I can give back and how I can make a difference in the lives of others and how I can like know that no matter what, if for some reason it's my last day, that I'm going to go out and there's going to be a lot of folks who are like, wow, this was a really good person who tried to make a difference in the world, tried to make the world a better place rather than just taking from it her whole life, which by the way was the person I used to be.
Oh, same. I 1000% was that person. And you're right. It is so freeing because I was just thinking yesterday, I was in a training. It was about awareness for sex trafficking. And it's a cause that I have just become incredibly passionate about, and going out and getting into some schools and training kids on the red flags, things to look out for so they don't become victims. And I just felt myself getting so excited and being like, Karen, you have all this time now in your schedule and you can really do more with this. And it doesn't need to make you money because you already have money and your money makes you money. So like, this is now part of your purpose, right? This is like the evolution of you being an entrepreneur is also now this volunteer arm that you can do and you can give of your time. And that is just like so exciting. I did not see that coming. I did not expect that when I started my own business. I thought this was just going to be the thing I did. And I didn't know there was going to be this whole other volunteer component. And it's been so, I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I was still living in that old scarcity mindset.
Totally. Like yesterday, I'll give you an example of this too. I got an email. I'm in Arizona. I'm originally from California, and I've been very involved in getting to know the governor and different causes and being supportive of different ballot measures. And so I got this random email yesterday at like noon, and I had not seen previous emails. Maybe I missed them, but it was like, oh, you're being invited to be a part of this 12-week education for like people who want to run as a candidate for an elected office, or if you want to be an activist. And it starts tonight at 6:00. And I literally was like, it took me 2 minutes to just fill out the little paperwork of why I was interested in it. And the next thing you know, I'm in this like free 12-week training with Arizona List. I was just like, what's going on? Just like the magic that I had the space, that I was already thinking about potentially running for office. And then here it is. It's like, there's this golden pathway and we're going to make it easy for you. I'm like, this is divine.
Yeah. And you wouldn't have that if you didn't have the space, right? So prosperity for me is also time prosperity, right? Not just money, but like really that freedom of time. So I love it. Okay. I want to make sure we touch on this before we wrap up is you have a signature I Prosper process that's in the book. And I just would love for you to talk a little bit about it, why it's so powerful for changing your relationship with money, what it stands for, and maybe just give us a quick overview.
So remember back to the story about Jenny and about what was helping her to make these huge changes, and my other clients too. When I realized that this book was coming together, I wanted to reverse engineer what people had been spending thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, like working with me one-on-one. I wanted to reverse engineer what was the process that I was taking them through. And could I put everything in the book so that anyone could come and do it? So the process is just that. Like, what would I want to do if I was knowing I have scarcity thoughts and scarcity patterns and I want to be living more abundantly? And the process spells out the acronym I for intention, P for pattern, right? So that what's the pattern that's happening in my life that I don't want? R is for reclaiming your feelings. O is for opportunity. We can go into any of these, but I'll just go through them first this way. S, which is the heart chakra, is for the story, like the money story. P is for permission. E is for evidence, and then R is for reinventing your life, which comes right back to what it is that you do. I forgot.
I know. I love that. And we were chatting right before this too about the possibilities that reinvention just opens up for you, and that there's just things that you didn't even know were available. It's almost like you have blinders on, right? And you only see the world through this one lens. And then all of a sudden, when you start to reinvent, it's like the blinders get opened a little bit and then they start to fall away. And you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know all of this was available to me. This is so exciting. But you can't know until you experience it, right? And until you take steps in that direction.
Totally. I'm probably could call myself like a epiphany junkie or a aha junkie. Maybe you can relate to that. Like these moments where you thought the world was one way and then all of a sudden pieces come together and you're like, your whole entire worldview has changed as a result of something happening, right? Or some realization. And so the process is meant to have those happen so that you can look at the world through a different lens, a different perspective. And I'll give you an example of that. Particularly, I'm just going to pick permission for a second, which is kind of in the later stages, but it speaks to me. What I found, about 85% of my clients are women, 15% men, maybe sometimes some years more, some years less, but women. So I feel like I'm a bit more of a specialist about women. And permission, when I was going through this over and over and over again with so many of my clients and myself included, I realized that many times we don't actually change, like fundamentally change our approach until permission is given, which is really, really sad. I mean, I wish it wasn't this way. But I realized that if we can go through this incredible epiphany, we can have all these new realizations, but if we don't give ourselves permission to actually move forward in a different way, to see ourselves as a new individual, as someone who's reinventing their lives, ultimately nobody can give ourselves permission but ourselves. And we have to give ourselves permission. And this chapter takes you through some of the ideas of how to actually do that for yourself and make sure that you're not missing the point.
Oh, that is so powerful. And it is a great point because I say to people all the time, like, if you've been looking for permission, I give it to you. But it's really true that you have to do it for yourself, because hearing someone else give you permission and you giving yourself permission, again, two totally separate things.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So beautiful. I'm glad that you pulled that one out. All right. I could talk to you forever. We might have to have you back, probably, definitely. But I do have one final signature question that I love to ask all my guests. And that is, what would you say to the woman listening who knows she wants to make a change in her life, but isn't sure how to get started?
First of all, I'd acknowledge her awareness, like recognizing the need is significant. It shows awareness, courage, even when the path forward isn't clear. I would always suggest starting small because major life changes don't require dramatic first steps. Sometimes beginning with like tiny, manageable steps creates the momentum and creates the confidence. I would encourage her to spend time getting clear on what's feeling misaligned, just like what we've been talking about this whole time. And then journal about what change she's seeking and why it matters so much to her. And then identify, and I say her, could be him, I know. Identify one small action to take and then do that. One of the things that we did, I used to have several group programs that I was managing, and we did this program called Next Tiny Step. And we would get together every week in a small group of individuals who were just supporting each other every step of the way. And the idea is when we were done with the meeting, every single person had to say, like, this is the next tiny step. They would put it on their calendar. And then the following week, we would check in, right, to say if we had done it. But the way that it works is it wasn't like some big goal. It was just like, I'm going to put an hour on my calendar where it says, like, I'm going to outline my ideas for the next book. And then it was like the tiniest, sometimes it might even be like 1 hour on the calendar to like open my screen and just stare at it until something comes at me for a book. You and I met through the authoress, so I'm using the book example, but like, you don't have to have a completion. You have to have the starting thing on the calendar. And then you commit to doing that starting thing. And then there's no judgment. As long as you did that thing, you're moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. Start small. Such wise counsel. Speaking of that, if people want to take the first step and go get your book, The Mindful Millionaire, or they want to learn more about working with you, what should they do? Where do they go?
The best first step would be to go to Wealth Clinic. So it's all one word, wealthclinic.com/vision.
Thank you so much for that. And I will make sure that I link to that in your social profiles in the notes so people can get to it. Liesa, this has been such a joy. Thank you for sharing all of this wisdom and for writing this amazing book. I know you're going to have such a big impact on so many other people's lives, just like you've had on mine. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're inspired to take action by committing to one of the tips or strategies we talked about in today's episode. If you want more accountability and support, I've got your back. Book a complimentary Empowered Exit Strategy call today. Visit KarenFreeland.com to learn more and book your 45-minute session. Until next time, stay fabulous.